The horizon stretched endlessly, a ribbon of gold and amber dissolving into the soft blues of morning. Dust rose lazily from the hooves of a lone horse returning to the ranch, spinning and swirling in slow, graceful spirals before settling on the cracked earth. Beyond the fences, the plains hummed with the quiet life of the early sun, a lark's song, the distant clatter of a creek, the faint rustle of dry grass bending in the wind. And there, in the midst of this open world, a young woman emerged, her steps deliberate yet uncertain, as though the ground itself might claim her if she did not tread carefully. She was 25, small in stature yet fierce in spirit. Her hair, dark and tangled from weeks of restless travel, fell in uneven waves around her shoulders, catching the morning light. Her eyes were wide, bright, and heavy with memory, carrying the weight of a life that had once been claimed by others. There was a tremor in her hands, not from fear alone, but from the strange, unaccustomed sensation of freedom. For the first time, she belonged to herself. The rancher who had bought that freedom waited across the yard, leaning against the railing of the main porch. He was a tall man, 35, with broad shoulders and the quiet authority of someone used to commanding land, horses, and men. His eyes, sharp and calculating, softened only slightly when they fell upon her. His intentions were not spoken aloud, yet the air between them carried an unspoken question. What does it mean to be free when another man has paid the price of your liberty? Around them, life moved in quiet patterns. An old ranch hand, 60 winters etched into his face, shuffled along the fence line, muttering to himself about broken boards and stubborn mules. A stable boy, barely 14, ran ahead with a bundle of hay, his small laugh echoing across the yard, light and unburdened. They were the backdrop to a world both simple and harsh, where each day demanded work and each quiet moment was earned. The woman moved closer, her boots scuffing the earth in rhythmic steps. The rancher straightened slightly, though his posture remained calm, almost casual. She caught herself staring, aware that she was being measured, but refusing to bend beneath the weight of expectation. There was gratitude in her heart, yes, but there was also a caution born of scars. She had learned that freedom could feel like a gift and a burden all at once, and she would not give her trust lightly. They worked side by side that morning, tending to the horses, repairing the fences that time and storm had worn. Her hands, though small, were capable and steady. He watched her quietly, noting the strength that lingered beneath the softness of her frame. Each brush of hand against leather, each command whispered to the horses, was a testament to her resilience. And yet, there was something fragile in her gaze, a lingering echo of a life once caged. Moments came between tasks, small pauses that held weight. The wind teased loose strands of her hair, and he reached instinctively to push them back. Their fingers brushed, a fleeting connection that spoke more than words could. She looked away, cheeks warmed not by shame but by recognition of something unspoken. He had not demanded her gratitude, but he had expected it, and she had given it with measured care. And yet, beneath the surface, a curiosity bloomed. Who was this man who had bought her freedom? Who was he beyond the dust and the fences and the quiet power of his presence? The day passed slowly, filled with work that was both honest and grounding. The sun climbed higher, baking the earth, and the horses' breaths came in rhythmic puffs. She found herself observing him in the quiet moments. The way his jaw tightened as he assessed a stubborn mule, the soft exhale of a man who worked not only with muscle, but with thought. There were no grand gestures, no demands for affection, only a presence that was steady, solid, unwavering. And in this, a strange sense of safety began to settle over her, fragile yet persistent. Lunch came with bread and cheese, shared quietly on the porch while the wind carried the distant calls of the plains. He offered her the first piece, and she accepted it with a nod, eyes meeting his briefly. In that glance, a subtle acknowledgement passed, a recognition of courage, of endurance, of unspoken understanding. There was no rush, no pressing need to claim each other. Only the slow, deliberate unfolding of two lives beginning to intersect. By afternoon, the shadows had lengthened. Dust clung to her boots, a reminder of the road she had traveled and the life she had left behind. She paused at the edge of the yard, looking out across the endless plains. Freedom was strange, and freedom was heavy, but it was hers. And in the quiet, she felt the faint stirrings of something unexpected, a flicker of connection, a whisper of possibility. The rancher observed from a distance, eyes softened but steady. He did not step forward, did not claim, did not demand. And perhaps this was what made him dangerous in the most subtle of ways. He had the power to take, but he chose restraint. It was a quiet challenge, one that teased the edges of her curiosity, drawing her into a dance of trust and caution. As the sun dipped low, painting the horizon in molten gold, the world held its breath. She had her freedom, yes, and she had her scars, but she also had a choice. And perhaps, in the soft light of the fading day, that choice was the beginning of something larger than herself. Something neither promised nor claimed, but gently offered, like a hand extended across a field of dust and sky. Twilight draped itself across the ranch, soft and amber, the kind of light that made even the dust-laden air feel golden. Shadows stretched long across the fences, curling over the rough-hewn boards, and the cabin's windows glimmered with the flicker of a single lantern inside. The wind carried the scent of rain from the distant mountains, promising change, and with it came a quiet patience that seemed to settle over the land like a gentle hand. Inside the cabin, warmth rose from the small hearth, wrapping around the young woman as she knelt to stoke the fire. Her hands, still rough from the day's labor, moved with a deliberate grace, each motion practiced yet tender. At 25, she had learned the language of survival, and now she was learning, slowly, the language of trust. Outside, the rancher leaned against the doorway, tall and silent, a presence that spoke more in its stillness than many men could with words. The air between them was neither tense nor casual. It was measured, like the soft beat of a drum beneath the chest, a rhythm waiting to be understood. He had begun to show himself in fragments, glimpses of the man behind the work-hardened face. A careful hand on a stubborn horse's flank, a patient smile when she corrected the lean of a fence post, a glance that lingered just long enough to be noticed, yet never pressed. She watched him, eyes tracing the lines of his face. The sharp edge of his jaw softened at the corners, the faint creases at the corners of his eyes that spoke of years under the sun, of laughter remembered and regret unspoken. In these quiet observations, she felt something stir, curiosity, perhaps, or the slow bloom of understanding. He was no savior, no hero of sudden action. He was a man, measured, deliberate, capable of patience and respect, and that was more dangerous, in its subtlety, than any storm could ever be. They moved together in the rhythm of chores, feeding horses, mending fences, tending the small garden behind the cabin. Each shared task became a quiet conversation, a negotiation of presence and space. The young woman found herself noticing his habits, the way his hands moved with confidence but never arrogance, the slight inclination of his head when he listened, the rare softness in his tone when he addressed her directly. There were moments of lightness, too. The stable boy, 14 and full of restless energy, darted between them, carrying bundles of hay and gossiping with a grin. The old ranch hand hummed low tunes as he worked, a melody that seemed to stitch the spaces between them with invisible thread. These small threads of normalcy wove themselves into the larger fabric of the day, reminding the young woman that the world was wider than fear and caution, and that perhaps trust could be cultivated like the stubborn seeds she planted in the garden soil. At one point, she paused to tie the reins of a particularly unruly horse. He stood beside her, silent, yet she felt the weight of his gaze. She straightened, forcing a casual air, but her hands lingered on the leather, aware of the subtle electricity of proximity. For a moment, words could have passed between them, but neither spoke. It was enough to exist in the same space, to breathe the same air, to notice and be noticed without demand. Later, as the lantern light flickered and the first stars appeared above, he offered her a hand to steady a wobbly table, his fingers brushing hers in a deliberate, careful touch. Her pulse quickened, not from fear but from recognition. Recognition that someone saw her, truly saw her, and did not recoil from the strength and fragility intertwined in her being. She looked up, eyes meeting his, and for the first time, a small, unspoken acknowledgement passed between them. We are here, together, yet free to remain ourselves. The old ranch hand muttered something about supper, and the stable boy disappeared to chase a stray chicken, leaving them in a rare, quiet bubble. They sat on the porch, the cool night brushing their faces, sharing a simple meal of bread, cheese, and whatever fruit the garden had offered. Conversation was sparse, measured, yet every word carried weight. He asked about the road she had traveled, about the land she remembered from childhood, about dreams she had once whispered into the dark. She answered in fragments, cautious but honest, revealing not weakness but a carefully honed resilience. And yet, beneath the surface of caution, something warmer began to grow. A subtle tension, not of fear, but of curiosity. She found herself noticing the softness in his voice when he spoke of distant memories, the way he paused before giving advice, the way he observed her without pressing for affection. There was a rhythm here, slow and deliberate, a dance of proximity and patience that had nothing to do with words and everything to do with presence. Evening deepened into night, and the first fireflies began to twinkle along the edges of the garden. She leaned back on the porch, breathing in the scented night air, and felt the weight of the day's labor settle into something almost meditative. The rancher remained beside her, a quiet shadow, neither imposing nor absent, but perfectly present. The world beyond the cabin seemed to shrink to the gentle glow of lantern light and the soft breathing of horses in the stalls, and she realized with a quiet start that she had begun to relax. Trust, she thought, was like this. Not an instant surrender, but a careful testing of waters, a slow thaw of winter-hardened ground. She had survived by being guarded, by keeping her heart folded and compact, by placing herself behind walls no one could climb. And yet, here, in the soft amber twilight, she felt those walls soften, not crumbling, but bending gently under the weight of steady kindness. The rancher tilted his head, watching her, and in that simple gesture lay a quiet understanding. No words were necessary. In the shared chores, in the careful glances, in the patient silences, they had begun to speak a language older than their own, a language of respect, recognition, and the subtle stirrings of something fragile yet unbreakable. And as the stars climbed higher and the wind settled into a gentle lull, she allowed herself a thought she had not dared before. Perhaps freedom could coexist with connection. Perhaps her heart, long guarded and wary, could learn to lean toward trust, even if only in small, deliberate measures. The night whispered promises she was only beginning to understand, and in that quiet, shared stillness, the first true thaw began. Rain came without warning, rolling across the plains in thick, silver sheets, and the sky darkened with the promise of a storm that seemed almost alive. The wind rattled the cabin windows, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and distant pines. Inside, the small hearth flickered, casting warm, trembling light across the young woman's face. She sat close, knees drawn, hands pressed over the chill creeping through her fingers, and watched as shadows danced along the walls. The storm outside mirrored the tempest she had long carried within her. Memories, fears, the ache of freedom mingled with uncertainty. The rancher entered quietly, boots dripping mud, and set down a bundle of firewood. His movements were deliberate, careful, as if each gesture measured not only action but intention. He did not speak at once, did not fill the space with commands or expectation. He merely moved, and in his presence, the room felt both heavier and lighter, as if gravity had shifted to include something unspoken but vital. She looked up, catching his gaze. For a heartbeat, the storm's roar outside seemed to fade, leaving only the charged silence between them. She had learned to read people like maps, tracing the lines of intent, the valleys of emotion, the peaks of desire. And now, she saw him as he truly was. Not the imposing man of the ranch, not the one who had paid her freedom, but someone quieter, steadier, shaped by years of responsibility and restraint. He knelt by the hearth, tending the fire, and the small space between them became intimate, though no words had yet bridged it. She could feel the rhythm of his breathing, the slow cadence of his heart beneath weathered clothes. And in that proximity, the first stirrings of something deeper whispered through her, a tentative recognition that this man could see her, not as broken, not as property, but as a whole person, The storm pounded on the roof, the rain a relentless percussion, and finally, she found her voice. "You bought my freedom," she said softly, almost a whisper, almost a confession, almost a question. "But I fear you want my heart too." He did not flinch, did not scoff, did not attempt to silence her. He only regarded her with a steadiness that was at once unnerving and reassuring. Then, slowly, he spoke, his words deliberate, soft, carrying the weight of honesty. "I do not ask for what is not freely given. I cannot claim your heart, only offer mine, and hope it might be enough." Her chest tightened, a mixture of relief and caution, her pulse a drumbeat echoing the storm outside. She had feared this moment, feared that freedom would demand surrender, that affection would become another form of ownership. But in his words, in his unwavering gaze, she found something she had never allowed herself to hope for: respect, patience, and the quiet promise of companionship untainted by expectation. They moved closer without thought, a natural gravitation of bodies and hearts, until she sat beside him. His shoulder brushed hers, a soft, grounding touch, and she leaned into it, tentative yet unresisting. The storm outside roared, but inside, the room seemed to shrink to the narrow, golden-lit circle of firelight. He spoke of himself then, slowly, hesitantly, stories of his youth, of work that had shaped him, of mistakes made and lessons learned. She listened, not merely hearing but absorbing, recognizing the vulnerability in his confession, the humanity behind the rugged exterior. And in turn, she shared fragments of her own past, the pain and the endurance, the moments she had survived only by holding her heart close and tight. The fire crackled, the shadows played across their faces, and in that shared silence, the first true connection bloomed. Her walls, carefully built over years of necessity, began to soften, bending toward the warmth of trust. She realized that this man, who had seemed so imposing at first, demanded nothing but honesty and presence. And in giving that, she found herself giving more than she had intended. Small smiles, tentative touches, unguarded glances. Outside, the storm began to wane, the rain thinning to a gentle drizzle, and the first star appeared, trembling in the dark sky. He reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally, as though they had always belonged together in this simple act. No words accompanied it. None were needed. The gesture carried the weight of understanding, the quiet acceptance of feelings acknowledged but unspoken. Time slipped forward in the rhythm of the storm, and they spoke of dreams, not just past sorrows. She spoke of lands she had never seen, of books she had read in hiding, of small acts of kindness she longed to offer others. He listened, genuinely, as though her hopes and fears were treasures rather than burdens. And in that listening, she felt the rare, exquisite sensation of being fully seen, fully understood. The old ranch hand's soft humming drifted from outside, a lullaby of earth and memory. The stable boy's excitement at the storm's passing was a distant echo, reminding them both that life continued beyond this quiet intimacy. But in the cabin, in the firelight and the lingering scent of rain, only the two of them existed. Heartbeats spoke louder than words, and confessions were made in glances, in the tilt of a head, in the way their hands finally settled together, relaxed, unafraid. By the time the storm had fully passed and moonlight spilled silver across the wet plains, she realized she had begun to trust, not blindly, not recklessly, but with careful, deliberate courage. And in trusting, she had discovered a fragile joy, a tentative hope, that perhaps freedom and affection were not mutually exclusive, that one could exist without diminishing the other, that love need not demand surrender, but could instead honor independence. The night whispered its gentle approval, carrying away the remnants of fear and doubt, leaving only warmth, connection, and the quiet possibility of what might come. And as they sat side by side, hands entwined, hearts beating in slow, careful harmony, she felt the first true bloom of something she had thought lost to her: the courage to hope, the willingness to care, the quiet certainty that she could be both free and desired, both independent and cherished. Morning arrived with a golden hush, spilling across the plains and bathing the ranch in light that seemed almost sacred after the storm. The dust had settled, leaving the earth glistening with dew. Horses grazed lazily in the pasture, their breaths forming soft clouds in the cool air. The cabin's chimney curled smoke gently into the waking sky, a signal of warmth and life returning. It was a day that felt wide enough to hold both freedom and the tender stirrings of the heart. The young woman stepped onto the porch, bare feet brushing the wood, and breathed deeply. 25 years of life had taught her the weight of fear and the sweetness of survival. Now, in the quiet of this dawn, she understood that choice could be an act of courage too. She was free, wholly and finally. And yet, alongside that freedom, something else had begun to unfurl, a possibility that had seemed distant in the harsh light of past days. Love offered gently, not demanded, and waiting to be received. The rancher joined her, his boots soft on the dew-kissed grass, the sun catching in the lines of his weathered face. He carried no words yet, only the steady presence of a man who had learned patience through hardship and restraint through respect. Their eyes met, and in the silence, the morning spoke volumes. He did not own her. He offered her companionship, and that distinction made all the difference. They moved across the ranch together, tending the fences and feeding the animals in a rhythm that had become familiar, yet today it felt infused with a lightness neither had dared to name. Their hands brushed as they passed tools, their laughter rising without conscious thought, mingling with the song of birds and the rustle of leaves. The world seemed vast, but in their shared space, it was intimate, as though the plains themselves had drawn a circle just for them. She paused to watch the sun climb higher, and he stood beside her, quiet and attentive. He spoke then, not with a demand, but with a gentle clarity. "I want your heart," he said simply, "but only if it is yours to give. Not because I bought your freedom, but because I choose to be here, with you." Her chest swelled with a cautious joy. The words were both a question and an offering, a delicate invitation that carried no weight of obligation. She looked into his eyes and saw not ownership, but a mirror reflecting her own strength, her own resilience, her own capacity to love. And for the first time, she felt that freedom and affection could exist side by side, unbroken and unthreatened. They shared a quiet meal on the porch, the scent of morning bread and coffee drifting into the gentle air. Conversation was soft, deliberate, a weaving together of hope and honesty. She spoke of the land she dreamed to cultivate, of small acts of kindness she longed to offer travelers or neighbors, of laughter she had almost forgotten how to give. He listened, fully, without interruption, absorbing her words as if each one were a precious gift. Later, they wandered across the sun-dappled pasture, hands occasionally brushing, occasionally entwining. The stable boy, eyes wide with the wonder of youth, peeked from behind a fence post, and the old ranch hand hummed a low tune, nodding in quiet approval. Life continued in the background, simple and grounding, but for them, the horizon had shifted. It was no longer simply a line in the distance. It was a promise, a space where freedom and love coexisted. They paused by a small creek, water sparkling as it flowed over smooth stones. She knelt to fill her hands with the cold, clear liquid, and he followed, mirroring her movements. Their hands met, fingers brushing under the flowing water, and she laughed softly at the sudden intimacy. He smiled, a slow, deep smile that reached his eyes, and in that moment, no words were necessary. Heartbeats spoke louder than any conversation could. The afternoon unfolded with quiet joy. They repaired fences together, watched the horses chase each other in the paddock, and shared stories of childhood mischief and forgotten dreams. With every task, with every shared glance, their bond deepened, not in grandeur or drama, but in subtle, soul-deep understanding. She realized, with a tender surprise, that her heart had begun to lean toward him, not out of necessity, but by choice. Evening approached, the sky painted in molten gold and crimson. They returned to the porch, carrying tools and water, hands occasionally brushing until they finally settled together on the old wooden railing. She leaned against him, and he did not pull away. Instead, he wrapped an arm around her shoulders, a quiet anchor in the warmth of the setting sun. The plains stretched endlessly before them, a canvas for new beginnings, and the wind carried away the remnants of past fears, leaving only hope and promise in its wake. She spoke softly, her voice barely above the hum of the wind. I never thought freedom could feel like this, she said. Like it belongs to me, and still allows me to belong to someone else. He pressed a gentle kiss to her hair, the gesture tender, unhurried, and full of the respect she had longed for. And in that simple, sacred act, the world seemed to tilt, if only slightly, towards something larger than either of them. A truth that love, when offered freely, did not diminish the self, but illuminated it. Night fell gradually, the first stars blinking softly into existence. Lantern lights spilled from the cabin, reflecting on their faces as they lingered outside, hands still intertwined. The ranch felt alive, not with spectacle, but with the quiet magic of understanding, choice, and connection. She felt it in the steady rhythm of his breathing, in the warmth of his presence beside her, in the knowledge that freedom and love could be held together without fracture. And as she gazed at the horizon, she whispered a promise to herself, to the plains, and to the man beside her. I choose this. I choose both. I choose the courage to be free and the courage to love. The old ranch hand's hum drifted faintly from the distance. The stable boy's laughter echoed softly, and the ranch seemed to breathe in harmony with the two hearts newly entwined. The night air carried the scent of rain-soaked earth, of hope renewed, and of possibility infinite. In that quiet, luminous moment, she understood a universal truth. Freedom was not just the absence of chains, but the ability to give and receive love fully, without fear, without demand. And to anyone listening from far beyond these plains, from wherever they sat beneath the weight of their own hopes and memories, she might have whispered, if only the wind could carry the words, cherish the courage to be free. Cherish the courage to love. And know that sometimes, in the quiet, ordinary rhythms of life, hearts can find each other, steady, patient, and true. The rancher squeezed her hand lightly, and she leaned closer, feeling the strength of choice, the warmth of connection, and the promise of a shared horizon, wide, golden, and endlessly free.